The ocean has always been more than just water. It's a vast, whispering library of human courage, written in waves and wind. Picture this, thousands of years ago, with no maps, no compasses, and no guarantee of return. Ancient sailors pushed their wooden ships into the unknown, driven by something deeper than curiosity, something like destiny. These were the explorers who charted the first paths across the trackless blue, their names now etched in legend. But how did they do it? How did the Polynesians navigate thousands of miles of open Pacific, guided only by the stars and the songs of their ancestors? What secrets did the Phoenicians carry in their hulls as they traded from the shores of Lebanon to the tin-rich coasts of Britain? Their stories aren't just tales of adventure, they're puzzles waiting to be solved, clues scattered across time and tide. Think about the sheer audacity it took to sail beyond the horizon, into waters where monsters might lurk or the edge of the world might drop away. These seafarers didn't just brave storms and starvation, they defied the very limits of human understanding. They read the currents like roads, the stars like street signs, and the flight patterns of birds like compass needles. Their knowledge wasn't just practical, it was poetic, a dance between earth and sky, passed down through generations, and yet so much of their legacy is shrouded in mystery. Why did the Vikings risk icy northern seas to reach a land they called Vinland? What hidden technologies or forgotten wisdom helped the ancient Greeks and Egyptians cross distances that would daunt even modern sailors? This is where our journey begins. We're not just retracing routes on a map, we're stepping into the minds of those who saw the ocean not as a barrier, but as a doorway. Over the next minutes, we'll piece together the fragments they left behind, shipwrecks whispering of lost cargoes, carvings on temple walls hinting at far-off lands, and oral traditions that have survived like embers in the wind. Together, we'll separate fact from folklore, uncovering how these legends shaped the world we know today, and how their echoes still ripple through our lives. So tighten your sails and steady your course. The stories of these ancient mariners are about to come alive, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single wave. The earliest mariners didn't just conquer the sea, they befriended it, learning to read its moods like a familiar face. Take those 8,000-year-old dugout canoes from the Netherlands, hollowed-out logs so simple yet so revolutionary. They tell us something profound, that the human urge to explore isn't just about necessity, but about something deeper, something wired into our bones. These weren't just floating logs, they were the first classrooms, where generations learned to read waves like words and interpret winds like whispers. And then there's the Polynesians, whose voyages still leave modern navigators in awe. Picture sailing across 2,000 miles of open Pacific with no instruments, just the stars overhead, the swell beneath your feet, and the memory of songs passed down for centuries. Their wayfinding wasn't just navigation, it was an entire philosophy, where every ripple in the water and every shift in cloud patterns carried meaning. They didn't fight the ocean, they listened to it, understanding that the flight path of a lone bird might lead to land, or that the taste of salt could signal currents from unseen shores. But the Polynesians weren't alone in this dance with the deep. Along the Mediterranean, the Phoenicians built ships so sturdy they became legend, their purple sails appearing from Spain to Senegal. These were the original global traders, hauling not just goods but ideas, alphabet systems, glass-making techniques, even the concept of currency itself, all moving across the waves in cedar hulls. And let's not forget the Austronesians, whose outrigger canoes connected islands from Madagascar to Easter Island, in a web of travel that makes modern cruise routes look timid by comparison. What's astonishing is how these cultures, separated by vast oceans, each cracked the code of seafaring in their own brilliant ways. The Vikings used sunstones to navigate through fog, while Pacific Islanders charted courses with stick maps that encoded wave patterns like musical notes. It's as if the sea itself whispered different secrets to each civilization, tailored to their shores and skies, yet all shared one unshakable truth: that the horizon wasn't a boundary but an invitation. Underwater archaeologists keep finding clues that rewrite history, like the sunken village off Australia's coast dating back 9,000 years, or Bronze Age shipwrecks in the Aegean carrying copper ingots from Cyprus. Each discovery peels back another layer, revealing how these early mariners didn't just survive the sea, they thrived in it, turning the world's waters into highways long before roads existed. Their legacy isn't just in the artifacts they left behind, but in the undeniable proof that human curiosity has always been our most powerful compass. The Phoenicians didn't just sail the Mediterranean, they rewrote the rules of what was possible at sea. Imagine a time when the word ship meant something closer to a floating work of art. Sturdy cedar hulls, rigged with billowing linen sails dyed in royal purple, a color so rare it became synonymous with power itself. These weren't just vessels, they were floating treasure chests carrying everything from Lebanese cedar to Egyptian papyrus, from Spanish silver to Baltic amber. But their real genius wasn't just in what they carried. It was in how they navigated a sea riddled with pirates, hidden reefs, and sudden storms. Without compasses or detailed charts, Phoenician captains became human GPS systems, memorizing the quirks of coastlines like the back of their hands. They knew that a certain rock formation near Cyprus meant safe harbor, or that the smell of pine carried on the wind signaled the approach to Lebanon's forests. At night, they turned skyward, tracking the North Star long before it had a name, and by day, they watched the behavior of seabirds, nature's own navigational beacons. Some scholars believe they even used early versions of the camel, a simple wooden tool that measured star angles, allowing them to calculate latitude with astonishing accuracy. Then there's the voyage that still sparks debate among historians. Pharaoh Necho II's audacious order to circumnavigate Africa around 600 BC. Picture this: a fleet of Phoenician ships slipping past the Pillars of Hercules, turning south along the uncharted African coast, their crews enduring months of scorching heat and unknown waters. Ancient texts claim they even reported the sun on their right side as they rounded the continent's southern tip, a detail so precise it hints at truth, since the sun would indeed appear to the north when sailing below the equator. Yet skeptics argue such a journey would have been impossible without stopping for fresh water. So did it happen? The answer might lie in shipwrecks yet undiscovered, waiting silently on the ocean floor. Beyond their nautical prowess, the Phoenicians left a legacy that shaped civilization itself. Their alphabet, just 22 simple characters, was revolutionary, a stripped-down system so practical it spread like wildfire, morphing into Greek, Latin, and eventually the script you're reading right now. But here's the haunting question: what else did they know that vanished with them? Their famous Tyrian purple dye, extracted from thousands of crushed sea snails, was a chemical marvel lost for centuries. Their glass-blowing techniques produced translucent wonders that rivaled gemstones. And what of their oral navigational lore, the star songs and wave rhymes that never made it into surviving texts? The Mediterranean still whispers their name in the timbers of ancient shipwrecks and the faint traces of purple dye clinging to broken pottery. These weren't just traders, they were the original networkers, threading cultures together with every voyage, proving that even in antiquity, the sea wasn't a barrier but the world's first superhighway. And somewhere beneath the waves, their greatest secrets may still be waiting, tangled in the roots of a sunken cedar hull or encoded in the patterns of scattered amphorae. The Mediterranean had never seen anything like them, shadowy fleets appearing without warning, leaving only ruin in their wake. Around 1200 BCE, as the Great Bronze Age civilizations thrived, a force emerged so devastating they nearly erased entire kingdoms from history. The Egyptians called them simply the Sea Peoples, as if naming them might summon their return. Imagine the terror, coastal cities burning, empires like the Hittites collapsing overnight, and Pharaoh Ramses III barely surviving their onslaught by marshalling every resource Egypt possessed. Yet despite carving their violence into temple walls, the Egyptians left us no answers, only the chilling image of these invaders arriving in sleek, unknown ships, their helmets crowned with strange plumes. Who were they? Theories swirl like storm winds. Some scholars believe they were displaced tribes from the collapsing Mycenaean world or Anatolia, fleeing drought and famine. Others argue they were professional mercenaries turned pirates, capitalizing on the chaos of a changing climate. One inscription mentions names like the Peliset, likely the Philistines of biblical fame, suggesting these weren't faceless hordes but distinct groups united by desperation or opportunity. The truth might lie in shipwrecks yet undiscovered, or in DNA evidence buried in coastal graves, but for now, their origins remain as murky as the depths they sailed. What makes their story so haunting isn't just the violence, it's the timing. Their raids coincided with the Bronze Age collapse, a perfect storm of earthquakes, droughts, and rebellions that unraveled the Mediterranean's interconnected world. Trade routes froze, palaces burned, and the art of writing itself nearly vanished in some regions. Were the Sea Peoples the cause of this collapse, or merely a symptom? Some tablets from Ugarit, a doomed city, plead for help that never came. The enemy's ships are already here, our cities are burned. This wasn't just war, it was a reckoning. Climate scientists add another layer to the mystery. Tree rings and sediment cores reveal the era was marked by catastrophic droughts, forcing entire populations to take to the sea in search of survival. Imagine fleets of refugees turned warriors, their children starving, their homelands dust with nothing left to lose. The sea, once a highway of commerce, became a weapon. And when they clashed with Egypt, the cost was staggering. Though Ramses claimed victory, his kingdom never fully recovered, ushering in an era of decline. The Sea Peoples didn't just vanish, they dissolved into the cultures they encountered, some settling along the coasts, their DNA and traditions blending with the survivors. Their legacy whispers in pottery styles, burial customs, and even the bloodlines of modern Mediterraneans. But their greatest lesson isn't about destruction, it's about resilience. The world they shattered eventually rebuilt, trading bronze for iron, palaces for port cities, proving that even the darkest tides recede. And somewhere beneath the waves or buried in forgotten ruins, the truth still waits, as restless as the sea that carried them. Polynesian Wayfinders didn't just sail, they conversed with the cosmos. Picture standing on the deck of a Waukolua, a double-hulled canoe no wider than a modern kayak, with nothing but the Pacific's endless blue stretching in every direction. No compass, no maps, just the rhythmic creak of lashings holding the hulls together and the whisper of wind in the sails woven from pandanus leaves. Yet these navigators didn't see emptiness, they saw a highway written in nature's language. The star Altair wasn't just a point of light. It was Hokulea, the guiding zenith for voyages to Hawaii. The ocean wasn't featureless. Its swells bent around unseen islands hundreds of miles away, creating patterns a trained navigator could feel through their feet. What made their system revolutionary wasn't just its accuracy, it was its poetry. Before sleep, apprentices would lie with their heads pointed toward unseen islands, training their bodies to memorize star bearings through muscle memory. They learned chants that encoded generations of knowledge, how the flight of the Monu Oku, a white tern, always led to land before sunset, or how certain clouds clung stubbornly over lagoons due to the green reflection below. Even the color of the water told stories. Deeper blues signaled open ocean, while sudden shifts to turquoise hinted at shallow reefs before any land appeared on the horizon. Then there's the genius of their wave navigation. While European sailors later relied on compasses that could fail and charts that could be wrong, Polynesians read the ocean itself like a living map. They knew that islands disrupted deep ocean swells, creating rebound patterns that radiated outward like ripples from a stone. By kneeling in the canoe and feeling these subtle shifts through their legs, a technique called kilo pohaku, they could detect land when it was still below the horizon. Modern experiments prove this works. Navigators like Nainoa Thompson have detected islands from over 30 miles away just by interpreting wave interference. The rescue of this knowledge reads like an epic itself. By the 20th century, colonization had nearly erased traditional wayfinding until Maupiailug, a master navigator from Micronesia's tiny Satawal Island, shared secrets his ancestors had guarded for centuries. In 1976, he guided the Hokulea canoe from Hawaii to Tahiti without instruments, a voyage that reignited Polynesian pride and proved their ancestors hadn't merely drifted randomly, but had explored deliberately. Today's navigators speak of seeing with their whole body, blending science and spirit in a way that challenges Western divides between intuition and technology. What's breathtaking is how modern astronomy confirms their star paths. The same zenith stars Polynesians used to pinpoint Hawaii, Hokulea, and Hokupa align so precisely that navigators could correct course by fractions of a degree, effectively creating a celestial GPS. Satellite data now shows their described sea roads between islands follow optimal routes using currents and trade winds even modern ships might choose. This wasn't luck, it was the culmination of millennia of observation, trial, and error, refined into an oral encyclopedia of the Pacific. Perhaps the most humbling lesson is how these voyagers viewed their relationship with the ocean. Where European maps once labeled uncharted waters, here be dragons, Polynesians saw a realm of connections. Their creation stories tell of the demigod Maui fishing up islands, teaching that land and sea were kin, not conqueror and conquered. This worldview shaped their conservation practices, taking only what was needed, observing fish spawning cycles, and even transporting plants in canoe nurseries to sustain new settlements. In an age of climate change, their legacy isn't just about navigation, it's a blueprint for living with the natural world rather than dominating it. The revival of wayfinding has sparked a cultural renaissance across the Pacific, with voyaging canoes now sailing ancient routes from Rapa Nui to Alaska. Young navigators train not just in star paths, but in the ethics of their ancestors, understanding that true exploration isn't about planting flags, but about weaving bonds between peoples and places. As the Hokulea's sails continue to catch the wind, they carry forward an unbroken thread of knowledge, proving that the greatest technologies aren't always made of steel sometimes. They're written in stars, waves, and the human heart. Deep beneath the earth in Shaanxi province, hidden for over 2,000 years, lies one of history's most perplexing maritime mysteries, not ships of wood but of clay. While tourists flock to see Qin Shi Huang's terracotta army standing in silent ranks, few realize another ghost fleet waits in the shadows, dozens of intricately crafted boats, complete with oars, sails, and even terracotta sailors frozen mid-stroke. These aren't mere funeral trinkets, they're detailed replicas of real vessels, each plank and rivet painstakingly rendered in ceramic. Why would an emperor obsessed with immortality bury boats meant for rivers and seas? The answer might rewrite our understanding of ancient China's naval ambitions. Recent excavations reveal these terracotta boats weren't standalone oddities. They were part of an elaborate underground network mimicking the emperor's real-world power. Archaeologists found canals of mercury winding through the tomb, possibly representing the Yellow and Yangtze rivers, with the boats positioned as if navigating them. This wasn't just art, it was a spiritual navy meant to carry the emperor's soul into eternity. But here's the tantalizing question. If the Qin dynasty went to such lengths to recreate maritime power in the afterlife, how advanced must their actual fleets have been? Hints emerge from fragmented records. The Qin unified China not just through armies, but by controlling waterways, building standardized boats with interlocking hull planks that could be mass-produced, centuries before European shipyards adopted similar techniques. Some texts mention great ships sent down the Pearl River, possibly reaching as far as Vietnam. Even more provocative are the claims of Han Dynasty historians, who wrote that Qin Shi Huang dispatched expeditions seeking mythical, immortal islands, possibly Japan or Taiwan. Could these voyages have gone further? The plot thickens with discoveries along Africa's eastern coast, Chinese pottery shards dating to the 3rd century BC near Zanzibar, and genetic studies showing Asian crops appearing in Madagascar around the same era. While mainstream scholars caution against overreach, the timing aligns eerily with the Qin's short but explosively innovative reign. Imagine if their naval technology, like their standardized weights or crossbow triggers, had been applied to ocean exploration. The terracotta fleet's design offers clues: high prows for rough waters, reinforced hulls, and even what appear to be watertight compartments, a feature Europeans wouldn't develop for another 1,000 years. Perhaps the most haunting evidence comes from the emperor's own obsessions. He famously sought elixirs of immortality from overseas alchemists, and his court records mention strange visitors from beyond the seas. Were these merely traders or envoys from lands the Qin had contacted? The tomb's boats, modeled after real vessels, suggest a culture deeply invested in maritime possibilities, one that may have pushed beyond coastal waters into the unknown. Until more wrecks are found or new texts deciphered, the terracotta fleet remains a silent sentinel at the edge of history's map, reminding us that the past's greatest adventures might still be waiting beneath the waves or buried in clay. Viking longships weren't just vessels, they were feats of engineering brilliance, sleek as knives slicing through the waves. Picture a ship so light a crew could carry it over land, yet sturdy enough to withstand the North Atlantic's fury, with a hull so shallow it could glide up rivers or beach on unknown shores without a harbor. These weren't just boats, they were the ultimate all-terrain vehicles of their age, equally at home on open ocean or winding European waterways, and at the heart of their success lay a secret weapon, the sunstone. No bigger than a thumb, this unassuming crystal could reveal the sun's position even through thick fog or storm clouds by filtering polarized light, a trick modern science only confirmed in 2011. But navigation was just part of their genius. The sagas, those vivid oral histories once brushed off as fantasy, paint a world where Vikings reached lands far beyond their Scandinavian fjords. Take Leif Erikson's voyage to Vinland, a place described with wild grapes and mild winters. For centuries, scholars debated its location until 1960, when a Newfoundland fisherman's tip led archaeologists to Elant's Ox Meadows. There, beneath the peat, lay the unmistakable outline of Viking turf houses, a smithy's forge, even a bronze cloak pin. Suddenly, the sagas weren't just stories, they were logbooks proving Norse feet had tread American soil 5 centuries before Columbus. What's staggering isn't just that they crossed the Atlantic, it's how often they did it. Recent studies of wood fragments at Elan's Oaks Meadows show some were cut decades apart, suggesting regular voyages, not just a one-off accident. And the sagas hint at even bolder journeys, mentions of Antikythira, a land of white men, possibly as far south as New England, or tales of encounters with indigenous peoples the Norse called Skraelings. Could other Viking settlements lie undiscovered along North America's eastern coast? Marine archaeologists are now scanning riverbanks and seabeds with magnetic sensors, hoping to find the telltale iron nails that would mark another longship's landing. Yet the Vikings' maritime legacy stretches far beyond the Atlantic. Their river routes shaped empires trading amber and furs down the Volga to Constantinople, where Norse guardsmen served Byzantine emperors. In the west, they sailed up the Seine to besiege Paris, and in the east, their riverboats reached the Caspian Sea, trading with silver-hoarding caliphs. Their influence lingers in place names from Dublin to Kiev, and even in our days of the week Thursday, Thor's Day, a linguistic fossil of their cultural reach. But perhaps their greatest secret lies in the silence of their ships. Unlike Mediterranean galleys, Viking longships moved almost soundlessly under sail or oar, appearing without warning, a tactic that made their raids so terrifying. Modern reconstructions like the Sea Stallion have proven their speed, sailing from Norway to Ireland in just 6 days, outpacing modern yachts. This wasn't just transport, it was psychological warfare, turning their ships into symbols of unstoppable momentum. What remains to be found? The sagas speak of ships lost in Greenland's icy waters, their hulls possibly preserved in the cold, or of trading posts buried under centuries of Arctic soil. With climate change melting northern ice, new sites emerge almost yearly: a Viking sword in a Norwegian glacier, a Norse cloak pin in Canada's Arctic. Each discovery peels back another layer, revealing not just raiders but explorers, traders, and above all, some of history's most audacious sailors. Their story isn't carved solely in runestones, it's written in the very currents they mastered, waiting for the next wave to reveal its secrets. Plato's story of Atlantis begins not with a roaring storm or crumbling towers, but with a quiet conversation between friends. In his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BCE, he describes an advanced island nation beyond the Pillars of Hercules, a utopia of concentric rings, thriving harbors, and mysterious orichalcum metal. But here's the twist: he frames it as a cautionary tale, a civilization so drunk on power that the gods drowned it in a single day and night. Was this pure fiction, a political allegory for Athenian hubris? Or could it have been rooted in a real catastrophe, passed down through generations like a half-remembered dream? The strongest candidate for Atlantis's inspiration lies in the Aegean. Around 1600 BCE, the volcanic island of Thera, modern Santorini, erupted with a force estimated to be 4 times stronger than Krakatoa. The Minoans, a seafaring culture on nearby Crete, had palaces with running water, vibrant frescoes, and trade networks stretching to Egypt. Sound familiar? The eruption's tsunamis would have devastated their ports, while ash blotted out the sun for years. Archaeologists even found Minoan buildings on Thera buried under 60 feet of pumice, frozen mid-collapse. Could this have been the kernel of Plato's story, warped by time and retelling? Yet the allure of Atlantis isn't just about geology, it's about human imagination. Over centuries, the legend has morphed to fit our anxieties and aspirations. In the 1800s, occultists claimed it was a psychic paradise. In the 1960s, conspiracy theorists placed it near Bimini, citing underwater roads later debunked as natural rock formations. Even Nazi expeditions reportedly searched for Atlantean superhumans in Tibet. Each era remakes Atlantis in its own image, revealing more about us than about any lost city. But could there be a grain of truth beneath the myth? Satellite imaging has revealed submerged structures off Cuba's coast and India's Gulf of Combat, rectangular shapes too precise for nature, though skeptics argue they could be eroded geology. Marine archaeologists also study Doggerland, a North Sea landmass flooded around 6000 BCE, where hunter-gatherers might have witnessed rising waters swallowing their world. These aren't Plato's Atlantis, but they prove cataclysmic drownings did reshape human history. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue comes from Plato himself. He dates Atlantis's fall to 9,000 years before his time, around 11,500 years ago, coinciding with the Younger Dryas period. Some scientists theorize a comet impact then triggered global floods, a hypothesis supported by nanodiamonds in ice cores. Could oral traditions have preserved this trauma for millennia, distilled into Plato's parable? The ocean keeps its secrets close until a smoking gun emerges, a script, a ruin, an artifact stamped with Atlantean glyphs. The legend will endure as both mystery and mirror. Whether allegory or lost chapter of history, Atlantis reminds us that civilizations, no matter how grand, are fleeting against the tides of time, and somewhere in the dark silence of the seafloor, the past still whispers. The Roman Empire's hunger for spices wasn't just about flavor, it was a driving force behind history's most ambitious maritime network. Picture a fleet of Indian Ocean dhows, their triangular lateen sails billowing with monsoon winds, carrying peppercorns so precious they were sold grain by grain. This wasn't just trade, it was a high-stakes relay race across 6,000 miles of open water, connecting Rome's gold to China's silk through ports that thrived like cosmopolitan hubs centuries before globalization became a buzzword. At the heart of it all lay the Srivijaya Empire, a maritime superpower few textbooks mention. Based in Sumatra, these rulers didn't just tax passing ships, they mastered the art of oceanic diplomacy, keeping trade flowing smoothly between Hindu, Buddhist, Muslim, and Christian merchants who all anchored at their golden riverside capital, Palembang. What made this system revolutionary was its simplicity. Ancient mariners didn't fight nature, they partnered with it. The Indian Ocean's monsoon winds switched direction predictably each year, creating a natural timetable sailors could set their voyages by. From April to September, winds blew steadily northeast, carrying ships from East Africa to India. Come November, they reversed, sweeping traders back from Indonesia to Arabia. This wasn't just convenient, it transformed the ocean into a self-regulating highway, where a captain could depart Zanzibar knowing the winds would eventually bring him home. The goods exchanged along these routes read like a treasure chest of the ancient world. Malabar pepper piled beside Mesopotamian dates, Sri Lankan cinnamon traded for Chinese porcelain, Persian turquoise exchanged for Sumatran camphor. But the real cargo was intangible ideas sailing alongside spices. A single ship might carry Buddhist monks heading to Java, Zoroastrian merchants debating with Hindu scholars, and Arab navigators sharing star charts with Tamil sailors. This cultural cocktail left fingerprints everywhere: Indonesian temples adorned with Indian elephants, East African coins stamped with Chinese characters, even Roman glassware buried in Vietnamese tombs. Archaeology keeps revealing how sophisticated these connections were. Shipwrecks like the Belitung, discovered off Indonesia in 1998, carried 60,000 Tang Dynasty ceramics alongside Abbasid gold, proof of direct China-Arabia trade. Even more telling are the humble things. Cooking pots aboard these wrecks held traces of meals prepared en route, curries thickened with coconut milk, noodles flavored with fermented fish sauce, microscopic evidence of culinary traditions crisscrossing the ocean. Perhaps the greatest testament to this network's resilience is how it outlasted empires. When Rome fell, the spice routes adapted. When the Black Death ravaged Eurasia, ships still sailed. For over 1,500 years, monsoon winds kept turning, carrying not just goods but something more precious: the unshakable human conviction that the sea, far from being a barrier, is our oldest and most enduring bridge. And as modern divers still find scattered cargoes resting silently on the seabed, each artifact whispers the same truth: connectivity isn't a modern invention, it's coded into our past as deeply as the tides themselves. The Egyptians didn't just build boats, they wove them. Along the Nile, where papyrus reeds grew thick as forests, ancient shipwrights created vessels by bundling stems tighter than rope, forming hulls so buoyant they could float for weeks under the weight of stone obelisks. These weren't crude rafts, they were feats of engineering with upturned prow and stern to navigate shifting currents, and sails woven from the same reeds that drank the river's water. When Pharaoh Sneferu needed cedar from Lebanon, his engineers lashed papyrus boats together into giant cargo carriers capable of hauling 40-ton stone blocks, all without a single nail or plank of wood. Meanwhile, across the Mediterranean, Greek shipbuilders faced a different challenge: speed and maneuverability for naval warfare. Their solution, the trireme, a sleek 120-foot warship powered by 170 rowers arranged in 3 stacked tiers. What made these vessels revolutionary wasn't just their oar system, but the physics behind them. By dipping oars at staggered depths, Greek engineers created a hull that barely disturbed the water's surface, allowing speeds up to 10 knots, faster than many sailing ships of the era. The real genius lay in the keel, a reinforced spine running the ship's length that allowed ramming enemy vessels without splintering. Modern simulations show these rams struck with the force of a speeding car, proving ancient naval battles were less about boarding actions and more about precision engineering. Half a world away, Austronesian shipwrights solved ocean travel's greatest problem: stability. Their solution, the outrigger canoe, seems simple at first glance: a second parallel hull connected by lateral beams. But the science behind it is profound. By placing buoyancy outside the main hull, these vessels could ride waves like a tightrope walker's balancing pole, preventing capsizes even in Pacific typhoons. The real marvel was in the lashings, not a single metal nail, but miles of hand-woven coconut fiber ropes that flexed with the waves rather than resisting them. When European ships later arrived in the Pacific, their rigid iron-fastened hulls often cracked in storms, while outriggers simply bent and bounced back. Then there's the Chinese junk, a masterpiece of wind power perfected over 2,000 years. Its battened sails, stiffened with horizontal bamboo slats, could pivot like Venetian blinds, catching wind from any direction without needing to reposition the entire mast. But the breakthrough was below deck, watertight bulkheads dividing the hull into compartments, so a single breach wouldn't doom the ship. This innovation, inspired by the structure of bamboo stalks, didn't reach Europe until the 1800s. Modern engineers now recognize these bulkheads as the ancestors of today's submarine and spaceship designs. What ties these disparate traditions together? Each civilization built not just for function, but in conversation with their environment. Egyptian papyrus boats mirrored the flexibility of river reeds. Greek triremes echoed the darting motions of Mediterranean fish. Austronesian outriggers mimicked the stability of mangrove roots in tidal zones, and Chinese junks took their cues from the bending but unbreakable bamboo groves. These weren't just ships, they were expressions of cultural wisdom, shaped by generations observing how nature solves problems of movement and balance. Today's naval architects are rediscovering these lessons. Wave-piercing bows on modern ferries borrow from Polynesian designs. flexible sail systems on cargo ships echo Chinese baton technology. Even the U.S. Navy studies outrigger principles for stabilizing unmanned drones in rough seas. The most surprising revelation: many ancient techniques outperform modern steel hulls in efficiency tests. A replica Phoenician ship crossed the Atlantic using 1/3 the energy of a similarly sized motor vessel, proving that sometimes the oldest solutions are the most enduring. Perhaps the greatest legacy of these ancient shipwrights lies not in the wood or sails they left behind, but in their mindset. They saw ships not as machines to conquer nature, but as extensions of it, living systems that danced with wind and wave rather than fighting against them. In an age of climate change and fuel crises, that philosophy might be their most valuable gift to our future. The Bermuda Triangle doesn't appear on any official nautical charts, yet its legend looms larger than the actual stretch of ocean between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. What makes this patch of water so infamous isn't just the disappearances, it's the way fact and fiction have twisted together like ship ropes in a storm. Take the case of Flight 19 5U.S. Navy bombers that vanished in December 1945 during a routine training mission. The squadron leader's final radio transmission, "We are entering white water, nothing seems right," became the cornerstone of triangle lore. But dive deeper and the story unravels: inexperienced pilots, malfunctioning compasses, and a commander who refused to switch to emergency frequencies. The real tragedy wasn't supernatural, it was a cascade of human errors amplified by bad weather. Yet the triangle's grip on our imagination isn't just about vanished planes. Centuries before radar, sailors whispered of the Sargasso Sea's graveyard of ships, where vessels became trapped in floating mats of seaweed. Modern science offers less eerie explanations. The area sits where the Gulf Stream collides with volatile weather systems, creating sudden microbursts and rogue waves that can tower over 100 feet. Even more plausible are methane hydrates, bubbles of gas erupting from the seafloor, which laboratory tests show can reduce water density enough to sink ships within seconds. These phenomena aren't unique to the Triangle. They occur globally, from the North Sea's Witch's Hole to Japan's Devil's Sea. What's fascinating isn't the myths themselves, but why they persist. Psychologists call it pattern seeking, our brains wiring themselves to see intentional design in random events. When a cargo ship disappears off Florida today, it's logged as a tragic accident. When 3 vanish in the same decade within the Triangle's arbitrary borders, it becomes a mystery. The numbers tell a different story. Lloyd's of London insurance data shows no higher incidence of sinkings here than in other high-traffic zones like the North Atlantic. Even the Coast Guard's official stance is blunt. No extraordinary factors have ever been identified. Perhaps the Triangle's true power lies in what it reveals about us. Ancient mapmakers scribbled, "Here be dragons," at the edges of their parchment. Modern culture just moved the dragons to a GPS coordinate. The ocean has always been a mirror for our fears, whether medieval sailors fearing sea monsters or 20th century pilots blaming UFOs. In an age where satellites map every inch of the planet, the Triangle offers something rare, a pocket of unresolved wonder where the unknown still feels possible. But the real magic isn't in the myths, it's in the science they overshadow. The same Gulf Stream that fuels Triangle legends also powers hurricane prediction models. Methane hydrate research could unlock cleaner energy sources. Even the Sargasso Sea's haunting seaweed forests are now recognized as vital ecosystems sheltering baby sea turtles and migrating eels. The ocean doesn't need ghosts to be awe-inspiring. Its true mysteries, from bioluminescent deep-sea creatures to the songs of humpback whales, are strange enough without invented drama. So why does the legend endure? Maybe because admitting the truth feels anticlimactic. The sea is unpredictable, humans are fallible, and sometimes tragedies have no deeper meaning. Or maybe because in a world of instant answers, we still crave places where imagination can outrun evidence. Either way, the Bermuda Triangle's greatest trick wasn't swallowing ships. It was convincing us that the ocean's real wonders weren't extraordinary enough. Pirates didn't just emerge from the shadows of history, they were forged by its upheavals. Picture the jagged coasts of Illyria, where tribes like the Ardii turned their swift lem-by ships into weapons against Roman grain convoys. These weren't lawless renegades by choice, but communities squeezed between expanding empires, their raids as much about survival as plunder. When Rome demanded tribute, the Illyrians responded with captured merchant vessels, sparking conflicts that would eventually drag the superpower into full-scale wars. The irony, many so-called pirates began as privateers, licensed by local kings to harass rivals until the labels blurred, and anyone resisting imperial control became a bandit of the sea. Then there were the Cilicians, operating from cliffside strongholds in southern Anatolia. Their hideouts, honeycombed with secret harbors and tunnels, became the Mediterranean's first organized piracy hubs, complete with ransom negotiators and forged shipping manifests. What made them formidable wasn't just their stealth, it was their adaptability. When Rome cracked down, they shifted from raiding ships to kidnapping elites, even snatching young Julius Caesar in 75 BC. The future dictator's response, joking with his captors while vowing to hang them, reveals the bizarre symbiosis between pirates and the powers they preyed upon. After his release, Caesar made good on his threat, but crucifixion didn't end the cycle. It just pushed piracy further underground. The line between hero and outlaw often depended on who held the pen. Take Queen Tuta of Illyria, branded a pirate queen by Rome for defending her people's autonomy, or the Lucca Sea peoples who may have turned to raiding after their cities collapsed. Even the Phoenicians, celebrated as master traders, likely dabbled in piracy when opportunity arose. These weren't cartoon villains with eye patches, they were mothers, warriors, and refugees responding to famine, displacement, or the simple calculus that a year's wages could be seized in one risky voyage. Modern archaeology peels back the propaganda. Wrecks like the one off Ulubur unshow pirate ships carried not just loot but cultural fusion Mycenaean pottery beside Egyptian gold, suggesting a world where raiders were also accidental connectors of civilizations. Their legacy lingers not just in skull and crossbones tropes, but in the unresolved question, when does resistance become crime and who gets to decide? The ancient Mediterranean had no Interpol, just currents that carried both empires and outlaws, their stories forever tangled like nets in the deep. The story of Jason and his Argonauts sailing to the edge of the known world feels like pure mythology, a tale of harpies, clashing rocks, and a dragon guarding a magical fleece. But scratch beneath the surface, and you'll find clues suggesting this epic might be more than just a campfire story. Take the Golden Fleece itself. In the ancient kingdom of Colchis, where the story is set, miners really did use sheepskins to trap gold dust from mountain rivers. Stretch a fleece across a wooden frame, let the current flow through it, and the wool's fibers would catch the heavy gold particles like a natural sieve. By the time you rinsed and burned the fleece, you'd be left with pure gold. Suddenly, the Golden Fleece isn't just a fantasy prop, it's a real Bronze Age mining technique wrapped in legend. What's even more intriguing is the route described in the Argonautica, the ancient text detailing Jason's voyage. The path from Greece through the Dardanelles, across the Black Sea to Colchis, mirrors actual trade routes used by Mycenaean merchants as early as 1300 BC. Archaeologists have found Mycenaean pottery shards along this very corridor, proof that Greek ships were making these risky journeys long before Homer wrote the Odyssey. The clashing rocks from the myth, those could be the treacherous currents of the Bosphorus, where swirling waters and narrow passages made navigation a nightmare for early sailors. Then there's the Argo, the ship at the heart of the story. Descriptions of its construction: 50 oars, a single mast, and a hull built from timber harvested at Mount Pelion match the design of actual Bronze Age vessels. A replica built in 1985 proved such a ship could indeed sail the described route, handling open seas and river passages with equal ease. The real magic might not have been in mythical materials, but in the ingenuity of ancient shipwrights whose designs were so advanced they seemed supernatural to later generations. But here's where it gets really fascinating. The Argonautica mentions encounters with tribes like the Mossynoeci, who lived in wooden towers along the Black Sea coast. These weren't invented creatures. Herodotus and other historians wrote about these very people centuries later, confirming their existence. Even the sowing of dragon's teeth, where Jason plants teeth that sprout into warriors, could be a distorted memory of ancient mercenaries rising from the soil. Colchis was famous for its elite soldiers, often hired by foreign kings. The deeper you dig, the more the Argonauts' journey feels like a palimpsest, a story written over older truths. Maybe Jason's voyage was a composite of real expeditions, embellished over centuries. Or perhaps it preserved navigational knowledge as oral tradition, using fantastical elements as memory aids for dangerous currents and trading partners. Either way, the tale endures not just as entertainment, but as a tantalizing whisper from an era when the line between exploration and mythology was as thin as the horizon at sea. Ancient sailors didn't just look at the stars, they held entire galaxies in their hands. The Polynesian stick charts weren't maps in our modern sense, but three-dimensional poems of the sea. Woven from pandanus root fibers and tiny shells, these intricate latticeworks encoded wave patterns the way sheet music captures a symphony. Each curve represented how swells bent around distant atolls, each intersection marked where currents collided. To read them required more than eyes, it demanded tactile memory, fingers tracing routes learned through generations of voyages. What seems abstract to us was as precise as GPS to a master navigator, proving technology doesn't need circuits to be sophisticated. Half a world away, Viking captains gripped sunstones, crystals of Icelandic spar that polarized sunlight like nature's own LCD screen. On foggy days when the sun vanished, these translucent stones revealed its hidden position. Tilt the crystal just right, and twin light spots would merge into one, pointing true north even at dawn or dusk. Recent experiments with a replica sunstone found it could pinpoint the sun's location within 5 degrees, accurate enough to guide longships from Norway to Greenland. This wasn't just geology, it was applied physics centuries before textbooks explained how light waves work. Then there's the camel, a deceptively simple Arab invention no bigger than a domino. By holding this wooden rectangle at arm's length and aligning its top and bottom with the horizon and a chosen star, sailors could measure latitude with stunning precision. The genius was in its scalability. Different notches along the camel's cord corresponded to ports across the Indian Ocean, turning celestial navigation into a plug-and-play system. When paired with the astrolabe, an intricate brass computer that could tell time, predict tides, and even calculate prayer times, these tools transformed the medieval Islamic world into a maritime superpower. But perhaps the most haunting navigation tool wasn't man-made at all. Pacific islanders learned to detect land by observing the flight paths of golden plover's birds that always veered toward the nearest island at sunset. Norse sagas speak of land clouds, stationary formations that hovered over distant shores invisible from sea level. Even the smell of blossoms carried on offshore winds or the sudden appearance of certain fish could signal approaching landfalls. These weren't superstitions, they were data points in a vast, living navigation system where nature itself was the interface. What's humbling is how modern technology keeps validating these ancient methods. Satellite imagery now confirms that Polynesian stick charts accurately depict ocean swell refraction patterns. Computer models show Viking sunstones would have worked even during the long twilight of Arctic summers. And that camel, its principal lives on in the sextant, still carried as backup on modern ships. The real revelation isn't just that these tools worked, it's that they represent different ways of knowing, proof that navigation has always been as much an art as a science. Some secrets may still lie buried. Roman writings mention a mysterious blue stone used to navigate cloudy Mediterranean skies, while Chinese texts describe jade compasses predating the lodestone. Perhaps future archaeologists will uncover these lost technologies, or maybe their principles survive unrecognized in some fishing village oral tradition. Either way, these tools remind us that every civilization that dared to sail beyond the horizon did so not by conquering nature, but by learning to listen to its whispers. Beneath the waves off India's Gujarat coast lies a riddle wrapped in myth and stone. The ancient Hindu texts speak of Dwarka, a city so magnificent it was said to be crafted by the god Krishna himself, a metropolis of gold-topped towers and bustling harbors, swallowed by the sea in a single cataclysmic event. For centuries, scholars dismissed it as pure allegory until the 1980s, when marine archaeologists stumbled upon something extraordinary. Submerged under 90 feet of water, they found massive stone walls, geometric platforms, and even an ancient anchorage system structures dating back an astonishing 9,000 years. These weren't random ruins, they bore the hallmarks of a planned urban center, one that thrived when most of the world was still grappling with the dawn of agriculture. What makes Dwarka tantalizing isn't just its age, but its sophistication. The underwater site reveals a harbor capable of sheltering hundreds of ships, complete with stone anchors and docking channels. This wasn't some primitive fishing village, it was a maritime hub, its layout suggesting advanced knowledge of tides and trade winds. Pottery fragments recovered from the seabed match descriptions in the Mahabharata, the epic that chronicles Krishna's Dwarka, while sonar imaging shows structures aligned in a grid pattern eerily similar to the city's mythical blueprints. But here's the twist. Carbon dating places these ruins millennia older than even the earliest Hindu scriptures. Could the Dwarka of legend be a cultural memory of a real, far older civilization? The implications ripple far beyond mythology. If this was indeed a bustling port 9,000 years ago, it upends conventional timelines of human urbanization. While Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley are celebrated as cradles of civilization, Dwarka's underwater ruins suggest maritime cultures may have flourished much earlier, their stories preserved not in clay tablets, but in oral traditions later woven into sacred texts. The site's proximity to the Gulf of Combat, where other submerged structures were discovered, hints at a lost network of coastal cities, perhaps wiped out by rising seas at the end of the last ice age. Yet the most haunting question isn't about what's been found, it's about what remains hidden. The currents here churn with silt, limiting visibility to mere inches, and strong tides have likely buried deeper layers of the city. Some researchers speculate that the ruins of modern Dwarka might be just a satellite of a larger metropolis still undiscovered, its grandest temples and palaces lying farther out on the submerged continental shelf. Others wonder if the city's legendary destruction mirrors a real geological event, an earthquake-triggered tsunami like the one that devastated the ancient port of Lothal nearby. What's undeniable is how Dwarka bridges the sacred and the scientific. For devotees, the ruins affirm a spiritual heritage. For historians, they're a puzzle piece in humanity's forgotten past. And for all of us, they're a reminder that the ocean's depths hold more than shipwrecks and coral. They guard the footprints of civilizations that once walked where fish now swim. As sonar scans reveal more anomalies along India's coast, one thing grows clear. The line between myth and history isn't as solid as we thought. The sea, it seems, still has stories to tell. The idea that ancient civilizations crossed oceans long before Columbus seems like fringe history, until you hold a Roman coin dredged from a riverbank in Maine, or examine sweet potatoes in Polynesia that genetically match varieties grown in South America. These aren't isolated oddities. They're pieces of a puzzle suggesting our ancestors' horizons stretched far beyond the maps we've given them. Take the Olmec colossal heads of Mexico, their broad noses and full lips strikingly reminiscent of West African features. Carved around 900 BC from basalt quarried miles away, these 20-ton sculptures raise an obvious question. Why would a Mesoamerican culture depict faces unlike any in their own population? Mainstream archaeology attributes this to artistic style, but alternative scholars point to potential contact with African seafarers riding the Canary Current, a natural conveyor belt that could have carried boats across the Atlantic in just 2 months. Then there's the botany that refuses to stay in neat geographical boxes. The bottle gourd, a plant native to Africa, appears in American archaeological sites dating back 10,000 years, long before any conventional transatlantic contact. How did it get there? Either it floated across the ocean by itself, possible, but unlikely for a plant that requires human cultivation, or someone carried it. Similar mysteries surround the presence of South American cocaine and nicotine in Egyptian mummies, substances that only grew in the New World. Skeptics argue these could be contamination or misidentification, but multiple independent studies have confirmed the findings. The architectural echoes are even harder to dismiss. Step inside a Maya temple, and you might swear you're in Egypt. The same steep pyramids, the same precise astronomical alignments, even similar ventilation shafts designed to align with celestial events. The mainstream explanation: parallel development, the idea that separated cultures can arrive at similar solutions independently. But when you see the identical step and notch construction technique used in both Giza and Teotihuacan, a method where interlocking blocks create earthquake-resistant structures, it strains coincidence. Perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from the water itself. In Brazil's Guanabara Bay, divers recovered what appear to be Roman amphorae, jars used for shipping olive oil and wine, dating to the 1st century CE. Off the California coast, stone anchors resembling those used by Chinese fishermen 2,000 years ago lie scattered on the seabed. Even the Norse sagas, long dismissed as fanciful, were proven right when Viking settlements were uncovered in Newfoundland. If the Vikings made it, why not others? The real conundrum isn't just whether these contacts happened, but why they left so few traces. Imagine a Polynesian canoe reaching Chile, without written language, metal tools, or urban settlements to impose. Their influence would dissolve into local cultures within generations. This wasn't colonization, it was cultural osmosis. A single ship blown off course might introduce a new crop or technique without triggering societal upheaval. And let's not forget the greatest silencer of all: rising sea levels. Coastal settlements where foreign sailors might have landed now lie underwater, their stories swallowed by the tides. What's at stake here isn't just rewriting history textbooks, it's reimagining human curiosity. If ancient mariners routinely crossed oceans, then our species' restlessness isn't a modern condition but a primal one. The Polynesians didn't wait for compasses to explore the Pacific. The Phoenicians didn't need satellite maps to trade from Gibraltar to Britain. Maybe the real anomaly isn't these voyages, but our assumption that our ancestors stayed put. The oceans have always been connective tissue, not barriers, and every unexpected artifact pulled from the earth is a reminder that history's edges are far rougher than we've been taught. The Norse sagas don't just describe Vinland, they paint a living portrait of a place so lush it felt like a mirage to sailors raised on Iceland's volcanic rocks and Greenland's icy fjords. Leif Erikson's account of wild grapes and self-sown wheat pointed squarely to Newfoundland's northern tip, a fact confirmed when archaeologists found Norse-style turf houses at Elands Oaks Meadows. But the sagas also hint at lands beyond places like Hop, where butternuts grew, a tree species native not to Newfoundland but to New Brunswick. This tiny detail suggests the Vikings didn't just beach their longships and stay put, they probed southward, perhaps following the Gulf Stream's warmth like a maritime highway. Then there's the Kensington runestone, that slab of greywacke found in a Minnesota field in 1898. Its surface carved with medieval Norse script describing a party of explorers trapped far inland. Most scholars dismiss it as a hoax, pointing to anachronistic letter forms, yet the stone's weathering patterns suggest its runes could be centuries old, and its mention of Vinland to the west aligns eerily with the Great Lakes geography. Even stranger are the so-called Norse mooring stones, rocks with holes resembling those used to tether Viking ships, scattered from Minnesota to Oklahoma. Could these be the work of a lost expedition, or just coincidental glacial pockmarks? The artifacts get weirder. A corroded iron axe head pulled from a Maine riverbank matches 10th century Norse designs. A medieval-style fire starter found in Ontario's Beardmore region. Even a 12th century Norwegian coin unearthed on a Native American settlement in Maine. Individually, each could be explained away, a trader's stray item, a later European contaminant, but together they form a trail of breadcrumbs leading far beyond Elands Oaks Meadows. Mainstream archaeology remains unmoved. Without a smoking gun, a definitive longship wreck or Norse burial site, the case stays circumstantial. Yet consider this, if the Vikings reached North America at all, why wouldn't they explore further? These were people who sailed from Baghdad to Baffin Island, who navigated using sunstones when clouds hid the stars. Their sagas, once mocked as fiction, guided researchers straight to Newfoundland. What if we've been looking for the wrong kind of evidence? Norse settlements in Greenland left almost no traces after 500 years. A fleeting camp in the Great Lakes might vanish entirely. The real question isn't just how far they went, it's why they didn't stay. Climate records hold a clue: the medieval warm period that made Vinland hospitable around 1000 CE collapsed into the Little Ice Age by 1200. Suddenly, the route south grew choked with icebergs, and Greenland's own colony starved. The sagas tell of skirmishes with locals they called Skraelings, likely the Thule ancestors of modern Inuit. Faced with a cooling climate and hostile neighbors, the Vikings may have simply packed up, leaving behind only whispers in stone. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between skepticism and legend. The Vikings weren't the monolithic conquerors of pop culture. They were opportunists, traders, and sometimes desperate survivors. A single storm-blown longship could have reached the Great Lakes, its crew assimilating with indigenous nations or perishing without a trace. Or maybe future technologies will uncover a buried Norse hearth beneath a Wisconsin cornfield, rewriting history once more. Until then, the sagas keep their secrets, reminding us that every impossible voyage becomes plausible given enough time and enough open minds. The ancient Greeks whispered of a land beyond imagination, Hyperborea, a realm lying past the north wind, where the sun never set and giants walked among fields of eternal spring. Herodotus wrote of Hyperborean ambassadors bearing sacred gifts to Delphi, while Pindar described its people living without old age or disease. This wasn't just another mythological stopover like the Elysian fields. Hyperborea was portrayed as a tangible place, reachable by determined travelers. Some scholars argue these descriptions could be distorted accounts of real northern cultures, perhaps the Scythians or even Arctic shamans, whose summer months of midnight sun matched Greek tales of endless daylight. What makes Hyperborea particularly fascinating is how its legend intersects with geological reality. 6,000 years ago, during the Holocene thermal maximum, Arctic temperatures were several degrees warmer than today. The Siberian coast, now frozen tundra, hosted lush grasslands where woolly mammoths grazed. Could early seafarers from Mediterranean civilizations have ventured farther north than we've credited, encountering these temperate Arctic zones before the climate shifted? The Sami people of Scandinavia preserve oral histories of a time when their ancestors migrated northward as ice retreated. Could similar memories have filtered south, morphing into the Hyperborean myth? Then there's the darker twist: how 20th century occultists, particularly the Nazis, hijacked Hyperborea for their racist ideologies. The Thule Society, a precursor to the Nazi Party, spun fantasies of a lost Aryan homeland in the Arctic, complete with advanced technology and superhuman inhabitants. This grotesque distortion shows how easily ancient mysteries can be weaponized, transforming poetic allegories into dangerous pseudo-history. Yet the original Greek vision held no such malice. It was simply humanity's timeless dream of an unspoiled paradise, a counterpoint to their own war-torn world. Modern satellite imaging adds another layer to the puzzle. Strange, symmetrical formations under Greenland's ice sheet, first spotted by radar in the 1960s, have fueled speculation about possible ancient structures. While scientists attribute these to natural geological processes, the very existence of such features keeps the door ajar for imagination. And let's not forget Plato's curious timeline. He claimed Egyptian priests spoke of Hyperborea existing 9,000 years before his era, coinciding with the end of the last ice age when sea levels were dramatically lower. Perhaps Hyperborea's greatest legacy isn't in proving its physical existence, but in revealing how all cultures seem to harbor myths of a lost golden age, whether it's Atlantis, Avalon, or the biblical Eden. These stories may spring from collective memory of prehistoric climate shifts that drowned coastal settlements or displaced entire civilizations. Each retelling adds layers, blending real experiences with symbolic longing. For ancient sailors, the horizon wasn't just a boundary, it was a canvas for dreams, where the line between discovered lands and imagined paradises blurred with every new voyage. The Arctic's icy grip may hide more than we know, but the true magic lies not in finding Hyperborea's coordinates, but in understanding why we keep searching for it. Long before Atlantis captured the world's imagination, another phantom continent haunted the edges of science and myth: Lemuria. The theory began innocently enough in the 1860s, when zoologists struggled to explain a peculiar puzzle. Why did lemur fossils appear in both Madagascar and India, but nowhere in between? British scientist Philip Sclater proposed a radical solution: a sunken land bridge spanning the Indian Ocean, which he named Lemuria after the furry primates it supposedly carried. For decades, this lost continent was textbook science, a tidy explanation for nature's quirks. But when plate tectonics revealed how continents truly drift, Lemuria should have faded into obscurity. Instead, it morphed into something far more intriguing, a cultural mirror reflecting humanity's hunger for lost origins. In southern India, the Lemuria myth took on a life of its own, woven into Tamil nationalist identity as Kumari Kandam. Ancient Tamil poets had described a vast kingdom swallowed by the sea, a golden age of sages and scholars now lying beneath the waves. When colonial scientists mentioned Lemuria, Tamil revivalists saw validation, proof their legends were geological truth. Temples began displaying maps of this drowned civilization, its imagined borders stretching from Africa to Australia. The irony, while modern science dismisses Lemuria as obsolete, its symbolic power remains undimmed, a testament to how myths can outlive the theories that birthed them. Occult circles reshaped Lemuria yet again, transforming it into a spiritual Atlantis. Madame Blavatsky, founder of Theosophy, claimed secret Tibetan manuscripts revealed Lemuria as the home of a third root race giant, egg-laying hermaphrodites with psychic powers. Later mystics placed it in the Pacific, blending it with Mu, another hypothetical continent. These fantastical retellings reveal less about ancient history than about the human psyche, our longing for a time when magic and science were one, when giants walked the earth. But what if Lemuria's endurance hints at a deeper truth, not of sunken landmasses, but of collective memory? The Tamil flood legends echo hundreds of similar stories worldwide, from the biblical Noah to the Sumerian Gilgamesh. Geologists now know that rising sea levels at the end of the last ice age drowned coastal settlements from the Persian Gulf to the Sunda Shelf. Could Lemuria and Kumari Kandam be cultural fossils, distorted memories of real migrations forced by rising waters? Underwater ruins like India's Gulf of Combat or Indonesia's Gunung Padang suggest human societies thrived in now submerged zones, their stories surviving as myth long after their cities vanished beneath the waves. The beauty of Lemuria lies in its duality, a scientific hypothesis turned cultural icon, a cautionary tale about how easily fact blurs into legend. It reminds us that every culture carries its own lost worlds, whether called Lioness, Wise, or Beringia. These aren't just fantasies, they're narratives encoding real experiences of displacement, disaster, and resilience. The next time you see a map of the Indian Ocean, imagine not a sunken continent, but the countless generations who lived along its shores, their stories rippling outward like waves from a stone dropped in deep water, visible only by the patterns they leave behind. Ancient mariners didn't just fear storms or getting lost. They dreaded what might rise from the abyss to drag them under. The Kraken wasn't some whimsical fairy tale to Norse sailors. It was a very real terror lurking in their logbooks. Imagine the shock of medieval fishermen spotting giant squid tentacles, each sucker lined with teeth wrapping around their tiny wooden boats. These encounters with Archaeology, some reaching 60 feet long, weren't just rare nightmares, they shaped entire mythologies. Icelandic sagas describe the Kraken as an island that moved, its massive body capable of pulling entire ships into the whirlpool of its wake. Modern science confirms these creatures exist, but for centuries they were the stuff of pure horror. Then there's Leviathan, the biblical sea monster whose name literally means coiled one. Unlike the Kraken's physicality, Leviathan represented something more profound, the chaos of untamed nature. Ancient Near Eastern cultures saw the sea as the embodiment of primordial disorder, and Leviathan was its avatar. Job's description in the Hebrew Bible paints it as nearly divine. Smoke pours from its nostrils. Its heart is as hard as stone. Scholars now speculate these passages might echo encounters with Nile crocodiles or even whales breaching violently, phenomena so alien to desert-dwelling scribes that they became supernatural. But the symbolism runs deeper. By depicting Yahweh subduing Leviathan, These texts reassured people that even the ocean's fury had limits. Pliny the Elder took a more clinical approach in his natural history, documenting sea serpents off the Gaulish coast, as thick as a barrel and heads like horses. His accounts, often dismissed as fantasy, gain eerie credibility when you consider oarfish slender, silvery creatures reaching 30 feet that occasionally wash ashore. To a Roman sailor, seeing one undulating near the surface could easily inspire tales of dragons. Even the Vikings' Jörmungandr, the world-encircling serpent, might have roots in real oceanic phenomena like bioluminescent algae blooms that make waves glow for miles. The most fascinating question isn't whether these monsters existed, but why their legends persist. Medieval maps didn't scribble, "Here be dragons," out of ignorance. They acknowledged the very human truth that uncharted waters will always breed stories. Today, we've swapped sea serpents for stories of megalodon sightings or the bizarre bloop sound recorded in the Pacific, later attributed to icebergs. The ocean remains our last collective frontier, with 80% of its depth still unexplored. Every time a new species like the giant phantom jellyfish is discovered, with 30-foot arms and no discernible mouth, it's a reminder that the line between myth and marine biology has always been fluid. Perhaps the real monsters aren't the creatures we've imagined, but our own fear of the unknown. When fishermen in Zanzibar still whisper about Popobawa, a shape-shifting sea demon, or when modern sailors report colossal shadows moving beneath their ships, they're participating in the same tradition that birthed the Kraken. The ocean doesn't need to hide prehistoric survivors or undiscovered megafauna to be terrifying. Its vast, lightless trenches are monster enough. And in a way, that's more thrilling than any legend. The certainty that, down where the pressure would crush a submarine, real wonders are waiting that might make our oldest myth seem tame. The Merry Celeste wasn't just a ship, it was a riddle wrapped in salt-stained timber. When the British brigantine Day Gracious spotted her drifting off the Azores in December 1872, everything appeared eerily normal. The sails were slightly tattered but still set, a half-eaten meal sat congealing on the galley table, and the cargo of industrial alcohol remained largely intact. Only the crew was missing. 10 souls vanished without a struggle, leaving behind personal belongings, navigational instruments. Even the captain's meticulously kept logbook, its last entry utterly mundane. No lifeboats were launched, no distress signals scrawled in haste. It was as if the sea itself had inhaled every person aboard and exhaled only silence. What makes the Merry Celeste story so haunting isn't just the mystery, it's how neatly it slots into a pattern stretching back centuries. Medieval sailors told of the Flying Dutchman, doomed to sail forever after its captain cursed God in a storm. The ancient Greeks whispered of ghostly triremes manned by skeletal crews. Even Norse sagas described Dwarka ships emerging from the mist, their decks lined with the undead. The Merry Celeste, though recent by comparison, became modernity's contribution to this timeless folklore, a tangible link between age-old superstitions and the industrial era. Explanations have piled up like flotsam over the years. The most plausible, an alcohol vapor explosion. The ship carried over 1,700 barrels of raw ethanol, and a minor blast could have panicked the crew into abandoning ship prematurely. Except the cargo showed no signs of catastrophic damage, and why wouldn't they return once the danger passed? Others blame waterspouts, those tornado-like columns of water capable of capsizing vessels, yet the Merry Celeste's hull was unscathed. More outlandish theories invoke pirate attacks, but no valuables were stolen or even giant squid assaults, despite no evidence of tentacled violence. The truth might lie in the psychology of the sea itself. Captain Benjamin Briggs, an experienced mariner, had his wife and 2-year-old daughter aboard, hardly the type to recklessly abandon ship. But the ocean has ways of warping judgment. A malfunctioning chronometer could have misled them into thinking they were closer to shore than they were, prompting a panicked evacuation. Or perhaps a sudden freak wave triggered fears of imminent sinking. The Atlantic in winter is a capricious beast capable of conjuring illusions. A distant smudge mistaken for land, a creaking hull misinterpreted as fatal damage. Modern forensics offer tantalizing clues. In 2006, marine archaeologists studying the ship's wood found evidence of stress fractures, suggesting the hull may have been subtly compromised. Combine that with a faulty bilge pump, and the crew could have believed they were taking on water when in reality the ship was sound. It's a tragic irony their very competence as sailors might have doomed them. The moment they stepped into that lifeboat, the merry Celeste became a self-fulfilling prophecy of abandonment. The ship's later history only deepens the eeriness. After its rediscovery, it passed through 13 more owners, each meeting misfortune, fires, collisions, even a deliberate sinking for insurance fraud. By 1885, it was run aground in Haiti, its timbers scavenged by locals who claimed the wood carried a curse. Today, fragments of its hull sit in museums, relics of a mystery that refuses to die. What lingers isn't just the question of what happened, it's why the story captivates us so. The merry Celeste taps into something primal, our fear of the unexplained, the unsettling idea that even in an age of steam and telegraphs, the sea could still pluck people from existence without leaving a trace. It's a reminder that for all our technology, the ocean remains the last great wilderness where logic can dissolve like salt in water. Every empty life jacket, every unfinished logbook entry whispers the same truth. We are temporary guests in its domain, and its secrets are never fully ours to know. The waters off Salamis churned with more than just waves in 480 BC. They carried the fate of Western civilization itself. As the Persian armada, boasting over 1,000 ships, entered the narrow straits, the outnumbered Greek fleet faced annihilation. But the Athenian general Themistocles had a plan. He lured the Persians into tight channels where their numerical advantage became a liability, and their heavier ships struggled to maneuver. Greek triremes, sleek, fast, and armed with bronze rams, darted like hornets, stinging Persian hulls before slipping away. The secret weapon wasn't brute force, but physics. By striking at an angle, the Greeks could shear off enemy oars while protecting their own. This wasn't just a battle, it was a masterclass in turning geography into a weapon. Rome took naval warfare in a different direction, literally. When they first faced Carthage's seasoned sailors in the Punic Wars, their inexperienced crews stood little chance in traditional sea combat. Their solution, the corvus, a 30-foot pivoting gangplank with a deadly iron spike at the end. As Carthaginian ships closed in, Roman marines dropped these boarding bridges like drawbridges, transforming a sea skirmish into hand-to-hand combat where Rome's legendary infantry could dominate. It was a stroke of brutal genius. Why outsail your enemy when you can outfight them? The corvus won battles but had a fatal flaw. Its weight made ships unstable in storms, costing Rome entire fleets to weather rather than warfare. Commanding these ancient fleets required more than courage, it demanded an orchestra conductor's precision. Without radios or radar, admirals relied on visual signals, flags by day, lanterns by night, and the occasional trumpet blast cutting through the din of battle. The Greeks developed a system of colored sails to coordinate maneuvers, while the Romans used drumbeats to synchronize oar strokes. Miscommunication could be catastrophic. At Actium in 31 BC, Mark Antony's fleet fell into chaos when Cleopatra's ships suddenly retreated. Their signal flags misread as a call to regroup rather than flee. Octavian's smaller, nimbler Liburnian ships exploited the confusion, herding Antony's heavier vessels like sheep into a slaughter. The true legacy of these battles lies in their enduring lessons. Themistocles' use of terrain at Salamis inspired modern choke point strategies like those employed in the Dardanelles during World War I. The corvus boarding tactics evolved into today's amphibious assault doctrines, where helicopters serve as airborne gangplanks. Even the lantern signals find echoes in modern naval flag codes and encrypted laser communications. These ancient admirals understood something timeless. The sea rewards not just strength, but ingenuity. Their greatest weapon wasn't wood or iron. It was the human mind's ability to turn limitations into advantages. Archaeologists still find echoes of these clashes beneath the waves. Off Sicily, sonar has revealed the skeletal remains of Carthaginian warships, their hulls bearing the telltale puncture wounds of Roman rams. Near the Greek coast, divers have recovered bronze helmets from drowned marines, their silent testimony to the chaos of ancient naval combat. Each artifact whispers the same truth. These battles weren't just about empires clashing, they were laboratories of innovation, where the desperate need to survive birthed technologies and tactics that would ripple through millennia. The next time you see a modern aircraft carrier steaming across the horizon, remember, its lineage stretches back to those wooden hulls and their admirals who first mastered the art of war at sea. The sponge divers who stumbled upon the wreck off Antikythira in 1901 had no idea they'd found history's most baffling relic. Amid shattered statues and corroded coins, a lump of bronze barely distinguishable from the seabed caught an archaeologist's eye, until it cracked open to reveal interlocking gears finer than a pocket watch. This wasn't just another artifact, it was a 2,000-year-old shock to our understanding of ancient technology. The Antikythira Mechanism, roughly the size of a shoebox, contained at least 30 precise bronze gears that modeled the cosmos with terrifying accuracy. Turn its handle and dials would spin to predict solar eclipses to the hour, track the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games, and even account for the irregular orbit of the Moon, a feat European clockmakers wouldn't achieve again until the 1400s. What stuns researchers isn't just its existence, but the questions it forces us to confront. The ship carrying it sank around 60 BCE, likely bound for Rome from Rhodes, an island renowned as a center of astronomy and engineering. Cicero himself wrote of a device built by Archimedes that reproduced the motions of the heavens, a description that matches the mechanism eerily well. But here's the unsettling part: nothing else like it survives from antiquity. Was this a one-off masterpiece or the sole survivor of a lost tradition of mechanical computation? Recent CT scans reveal tiny inscriptions, a user manual etched in Greek, explaining planetary positions and eclipse cycles like some ancient technical manual. This wasn't just a toy for the wealthy. It was a working scientist's tool, proof that Hellenistic thinkers had grasped principles of mechanical engineering we thought were medieval innovations. The mechanism's sophistication hints at a scientific golden age snuffed out too soon. Its differential gear, a component that allows rotation at different speeds, wasn't reinvented until the 19th century. The mathematical models embedded in its gear ratios show an understanding of Babylonian eclipse cycles blended with Greek geometrical theory, suggesting an international collaboration of scholars. Yet within generations, this knowledge would vanish as Rome's rise shifted priorities from pure science to practical engineering. The same wars that made the Mediterranean a Roman lake may have scattered the mechanism's creators, their workshops burned or their apprentices conscripted. Marine archaeologists now face a tantalizing possibility. What else might lie undiscovered in the Antikythira wreck? Less than half the site has been excavated, and new dives have uncovered bronze statues with inlaid glass eyes, silver goblets, and even a skeleton that may hold DNA clues to the ship's crew. Some scholars believe another mechanism could still be buried there, perhaps a simpler prototype or a more advanced model. The ocean floor near ancient trade routes is littered with similar wrecks, each a potential time capsule of lost knowledge. The real tragedy of the Antikythira mechanism isn't that it was lost, but that its very existence forces us to question what other breakthroughs vanished without a trace. How many libraries burned with Alexandria? How many workshops were plundered and melted down for scrap? This corroded bronze puzzle reminds us that progress isn't inevitable. Civilizations can forget as much as they discover. Yet its survival against all odds also offers hope that somewhere in the deep or buried under desert sands, other marvels wait to reset our clocks of understanding once more. The legend of El Dorado didn't begin as a city of gold. It started with a man covered in it. High in the Andes, the Muisca people of Colombia practiced a ritual so dazzling it seared itself into the imaginations of conquistadors. Their newly crowned king would paddle a raft to the center of Lake Guatavita, his body dusted entirely in gold powder, before diving into the sacred waters as attendants tossed emeralds and golden offerings into the depths. This wasn't greed, it was a spiritual exchange, a covenant between earth and water. But when Spanish chroniclers heard fragments of the story, they twisted it into something else entirely, a literal golden kingdom waiting to be plundered. The truth was far more profound and far more tragic. What's chilling isn't just how the myth grew, but how quickly reality blurred into fantasy. Within decades, El Dorado morphed from a ritual into a moving target, first a city, then an empire, always just beyond reach. German conquistador Philipp von Hutten searched until the Amazon's mosquitoes gave him fatal fevers. Sir Walter Raleigh mounted 2 disastrous expeditions, losing his son to a jungle skirmish while insisting the Golden City lay near Venezuela's Orinoco River. Even as late as the 1800s, explorers like Percy Fawcett vanished into the green hell of the Mato Grosso, convinced they'd decoded ancient maps. The toll was staggering, thousands dead from disease, starvation, or spear wounds, all chasing a mirage that grew more elaborate with each retelling. Yet beneath the blood-stained folklore lies a startling archaeological truth. The Muisca really did possess staggering gold-working skills, not hoarded in vaults but woven into their cosmology. Their exquisite tunjos, small votive figures, showed deities mid-dance, frogs with emerald eyes, and ceremonial masks so thin they flutter like foil. Unlike the Aztecs or Incas, they valued gold not for its wealth, but for its symbolic connection to the sun god Soe. Modern dredging of Lake Guatavita recovered hundreds of these offerings, proving the ritual was real, just not in the way the invaders imagined. The cruel irony. The Spanish obsession with El Dorado inadvertently preserved indigenous knowledge. Chroniclers like Juan de Castellanos recorded Muisca customs in desperate bids to decode the legend's clues, leaving behind ethnographies they never intended to write. Today, their accounts help reconstruct a civilization that viewed gold as sacred, not currency, a nuance lost on those who melted down artifacts into bland ingots. Even the name El Dorado reflects this distortion. It means the Golden One, referring to the Gilded King, not a place. The jungle keeps its secrets. Recent LIDAR surveys have revealed vast, interconnected settlements in the Amazon, proof that complex societies did flourish where explorers swore El Dorado hid. But these weren't cities paved with gold. They were marvels of terra preta agriculture and hydraulic engineering, their wealth measured in sustainability, not bullion. Perhaps the real El Dorado was never a location, but a cautionary tale about how easily cultural understanding can be swallowed by greed. As the last of the conquistadors died penniless in malaria-ridden ports, the Muisca's descendants still whispered the original story, one where gold wasn't taken but given, not a treasure to possess, but a language to honor the divine. As we lower our sails at this journey's end, the horizon stretches with more than just water. It's alive with the echoes of those who dared to cross it. Think of the Polynesian navigator whispering star chants to the night sky, or the Viking captain squinting through a sunstone's glow, turning fog into a road map. These weren't just travelers, they were philosophers of the unknown, rewriting the rules of what was possible with nothing but intuition and ingenuity. Their stories, woven from equal parts fact and legend, share a common thread. The sea doesn't just separate lands, it connects them, carrying ideas as surely as it carries tides. Consider the humble outrigger canoe, a design so perfect it still inspires modern shipbuilders, or the Antikythira Mechanism, a bronze computer lost for millennia that proves brilliance isn't bound by era. Every artifact pulled from the deep, every half-remembered myth, is a puzzle piece in humanity's greatest collective adventure. And here's the beautiful paradox: the more we uncover, the more we realize how much remains hidden. The ocean floor is still the largest museum on Earth, its exhibits waiting beneath layers of sand and salt. But this isn't just about the past. That same restless spirit lives on, in the marine archaeologist scanning sonar images for shadows of lost cities, in the sailor navigating by starlight for the sheer joy of it, even in you, watching this and wondering what lies beyond the map's edge. The uncharted waters of today might be cosmic oceans or the depths of human potential, but the drive remains unchanged. So let's not just admire these ancient mariners, let's honor them by asking our own bold questions, whether that's researching local legends or simply standing at the shore and imagining what could be. The ocean's greatest gift isn't its treasures or its terrors, it's the way it mirrors our own boundless curiosity. Hit that like button if you're ready to keep exploring. Subscribe for more journeys into the forgotten corners of history, and drop a comment below. If you could sail anywhere in time, where would you go? Until next time, keep your compass pointed toward wonder. Fair winds, fellow explorers, the next adventure is always just beyond.